thought I'd just do a short coda to Charles's talk and talk more directly about thinking about what Adam Smith would say. I thought, well, we might as well look at a tiny bit of what Adam Smith said and see how it lines up. And it lines up, of course, very well with what Charles said, but here we go. The main point for Adam Smith tonight, I think, is his metaphor of the invisible hand. So, Adam Smith, vital statistics, philosopher of the Scottish Enlightenment, empiricist, sentimentalist, laissez-faire economist. This is how he is currently interpreted, especially by neoliberal economists. Okay, the first use of invisible hand metaphor is in the theory of moral sentiments, and the invisible hand is the key to his idea at the moment. Okay, we've got a quote from him, and this is from the theory of moral sentiments in 1759, long before The Wealth of Nations. It's his first statement of it, and it's a much balder statement of the invisible hand, and even a stronger one than is in The Wealth of Nations. Okay, the rich only select from the heap what is most precious and agreeable. They consume little more than the poor, and in spite of their natural selfishness and rapacity, though they mean only their own conveniency, though the sole end which they propose from the labours of all the thousands whom they employ be the gratification of their own vain and insatiable desires, they divide with the poor the produce of all their improvements. They are led by an invisible hand to make nearly the same distribution of the necessaries of life which would have been made had the earth been divided into equal portions among all its inhabitants, and thus, without intending it, without knowing it, advance the interest of the society and afford means to the multiplication of the species. Controversial. So he said that in his theory of moral sentiments. He was known in his own time as a moral philosopher, not as an economist in any way, or an economic theorist. And this was part of his view. I think you would need to see it in the context of the Scottish Enlightenment and his own background and the background of the philosophers at the time. But anyway, this is what he was stating first up on the invisible hand. There's this invisible hand sweeping through. Selfishness provides benefit. Okay, he's mentioned it again, secondly, and this is where people like Bernanke would have picked it up. If you just Google Bernanke and invisible hand, you'll find that he's reified it into a kind of principle. Okay, it's mentioned again much later in The Wealth of Nations. And he puts it slightly differently, but it's the same basic idea. As every individual, therefore, endeavours as much as he can both to employ his capital in the support of domestic industry, and so to direct that industry that its produce may be of the greatest value, he generally indeed neither intends to promote the public interest nor knows how much he is promoting it. By preferring the support of domestic to that of foreign industry, he intends only his own security, and by directing that industry in such a manner as its produce may be of the greatest value, he intends only his own gain. And he is in this, as in many other cases, led by an invisible hand to promote an end which was no part of his intention. And this is the basis of neoclassical economics. And currently, Adam Smith is an economist, not a moral philosopher, though if you look at his version of it in his moral philosophy, maybe you'd prefer it that way. And so it looks like Adam Smith's saying greed is good, sort of, in a certain way. And we should let the free market rip. It'll sort everything out for us. But not so fast. It would probably benefit people such as Bernanke to actually read The Wealth of Nations and see what's in it. And we find in it a nuanced view that's not represented in how Smith is currently represented. Okay. What you find when you look at The Wealth of Nations is, and I'm going through this very briefly, but anyway, self-interest can be socially useful is his main point. So as Blog has said, the central theme that inspires The Wealth of Nations is the notion that selfishness, however morally reprehensible, may nevertheless provide a powerful fuel to a commercial society. And lots of people just stop there. But only in a market economy that is decidedly not free. No one would call what Adam Smith was conceiving a free market today. So Blog goes on, what distinguishes Smith's theory of economic development from more recent efforts in the subject is a continuous harking back to the framework of social institutions that harness and channel pecuniary motives. And this is very much his main point. So Adam Smith was not satisfied to argue that a free market economy secures the best of all possible worlds. He was very much concerned with the specification of the exact institutional structure that would guarantee the beneficent operation of market forces. The market mechanism would foster harmony, but not unless it was surrounded by an appropriate legal and institutional framework. And this has been completely lost, in economics, I should say, not elsewhere. And a few examples just to show very quickly the kind of thing that Smith was doing. Virtually the whole of Book 5, Chapter 1 is taken up with the problem of devising techniques for rewarding lawyers, clerks, judges, clergymen and teachers in such a way that the pursuit of their own interests will advance the interests of society as a whole. They're being moulded into the interests of society. Selfishness is being moulded towards it. And otherwise, Smith talks about public works expenses like canals and highways in the following sort of way. And this is what Blog says. Similarly, he argued that the greater part of the expense of public works, such as highways, bridges, canals and harbours, should be met out of appropriate tolls on the users of these services, with the remainder coming out of local revenue when the benefits were local, and otherwise out of general revenue. But the case for public highways, he contended, is much stronger than for public canals. The self-interest of a canal owner requires him to maintain the canal, or it will become impassable through neglect and cease to be a source of income. But, and to quote Smith directly, a high road, though entirely neglected, does not become altogether impassable. The proprietors of the tolls upon a high road, therefore, might neglect altogether the repair of the road and continue to levy nearly the same tolls. It is proper, therefore, that the tolls for maintenance of such work should be put under the management of public commissioners or trustees. Very much not the free market economics that you would expect. And Blog says, this subtle distinction serves to illustrate Smith's shrewd perception of the incentive effects of different organisational arrangements. He was fully aware of them and he would use them. And most of The Wealth of Nations is about how to mould things and use these incentives rather than just letting selfishness rip. So, having seen just a little bit of what Adam Smith actually said and what I think he probably meant, what might he say? And it's not going to be too different from what Charles has already said. We can generally expect that intra and international actors are likely to pursue their own self-interest. This was the key insight for Smith, but it was just an insight or an observation. It wasn't the basis for a principle of behaviour or a moral principle, certainly not at all, or an economic one. An invisible hand guides their self-interested action towards socially shared goals, but it's a weak force, not a strong one, and it needs to be corralled. Yet only with well-designed and effective global institutional structures will the invisible hand be allowed to work its magic. And that would be what I think that Adam Smith would be saying. So he'd certainly maintain that there was an invisible hand because this was his novel discovery in the 18th century. But it would need well-designed institutional structures to function, he would think. Okay, and that was pretty much it. Thank you.